Welcome back in another week of the Emerald Coast Sports Show. Once again, Gary Gesh, joined by my friend Christopher Saul. Couple weeks away, 1 week away now from the preseason games, 2 weeks away from the games in the regular season.
Yeah, and I mean those preseason kickoff games are going to be pretty exciting to look over, and let's just take a quick look over them real quick while we get our people coming in. But we also have a bunch of stuff in Walton County today. We're getting some Walton County football coverage going. I'm very excited about it because I feel like they get no love. Not so this year, my friends. We're going to get you, but preseason kickoff stuff. Baker at Northview. Should be an interesting one. We're looking over Choctaw versus Milton. I'm super excited about that one because we'll get to see just how real Milton is this year. And then going down the rest of this list, what are you looking at, man?
I like that South Walton preseason kickoff. I know it's going to be in their new stadium. I think it's going to be a great way to introduce those new facilities, which we'll talk about later. And then, like you said, the Milton Choctaw game. How good is Milton? Have they turned it around? We'll see. That's what I'm looking forward to the most.
I'm super excited to see if they've turned this thing around because I think that they've got a lot going for them this year with their new head coach, Ronnie Durrell. And we're going to actually start on the other side of the Emerald Coast with our Walton County team. So we have more info from Walton, South Walton, and Freeport. What do you want to start with first, man?
Let's get into the Walton. Let's go South Walton first.
Right on.
So,
okay, let's do it. What do you know, man?
Well, I went to practice last Friday. They had a big event going on. It was called the Seahawk Football Extravaganza or something like that. Had team pictures going on, just kind of showing off their new facilities to the community. And let me tell you, those new facilities are gorgeous. Brand new $18 million state-of-the-art football stadium. Beautiful track around it. The Jumbotron in the corner of the end zone there was just one of the best I've seen in high school football. And then the team came out and practice. I got to watch a little bit of practice. They have starting quarterback J.D. Brown returning through for 1,600 yards, 12 touchdowns last year. He looked pretty good. He's making some really solid throws. One thing I want to mention before we get too more in-depth on the players from South Walton, they had no home games last season.
Yep.
They had 3 games which were designated as home games. Those games were played at Emerald Coast Middle School. So I think the 2-8 record it looks bad at first. I think you dig into a bit of the weeds behind it. I think South Walton has got a good chance to turn things around this year. J.D. Brown's favorite connection, Grant Gilmore, is back, as well as a bunch of returns on the defensive side. So the Seahawks could be an interesting team to watch and probably a good spot to watch, too, in this new stadium.
Yeah, and, speaking of South Walton, I mean, this is probably the district that you and I are becoming the most familiar with. 3 teams kind of in our coverage area, and then Catholic is the 4th team. What's traditionally been the strongest team in this district. So I'm excited to see how this home field advantage works. They have, I think you said 8 games, if I'm not mistaken, at home. And then they have, I think, 2 away games, which are both district games. Last year was, like you said, a tough road to hoe, 2-8. But to get essentially 2 wins out of a 10-game away schedule is pretty impressive.
Yeah, and there are a lot of close matchups too, especially in the first 3 weeks of the season. They had 2 losses that were within 1 score and then a win. They play the same 3 opponents, all 3 at home this year. I think that's that. If you're looking at that as a South Walton fan or a South Walton Seahawk, you're looking at that as a positive opportunity to go 3-0 for sure.
That's right. And so moving a little bit further to the north, let's talk about Walton. Walton had a really great season last year, and they beat Catholic in the playoffs, something that doesn't happen very often. I mean, typically Catholic gets the first 2-3 rounds before they run into bowls or some other wood chipper further afield. But this year, Walton made it happen, or this past year, Walton made it happen. Is this something you're seeing happening again, or is this going to be maybe more of a rebuilding year?
Well, I think it's interesting for Walton. We go back to that matchup we were talking about against Catholic. I think it was 52-16. Catholic beat Walton in the regular season, and then you turn around in the playoffs. Quarterback Wells Bettenhausen, one of the best this area has seen in a long time. He led that win on the road in the first round of the playoffs. However, Walton does lose all 11 of their offensive starters, which I think is something that is hard for any team to come back from. I think it's going to be hard for Walton as well. They have some guys who have looked promising in preseason, but there's a lot of question marks around this team right now as if they can repeat that success with a whole new lineup.
Yeah, so Wells Bettenhausen is playing his freshman year upcoming at Lenore-Rhine University. 6'5", 200 and some odd pound guy. It's hard to replace, but so are the other 10 guys that got most of the snaps last year. And that to me is kind of a big narrative for a brand new head coach that's taking over as well.
Yeah, for sure. Jay Lindsey, lots of pressure on him, but his mindset is one of I'm ready for the challenge. I'm ready to take it on. A lot of the players as well are sort of ready to make a name for themselves. I know it's going to be quarterback Witten West. He's going to be getting the starts at least in week 1 and week 2. For Walton, he had 7 completions for 151 yards. So a small sample size last season, but he does have some returning experience. And then after that, it's just the pieces falling into place. I think one of the hardest units that it is going to be to replace the offensive line. Use your entire offensive line. I think that really just throws a wrench in the plans of any offense. And so Walton, that's the biggest question mark for me is will they be able to build an offensive line out of young guys, maybe guys who have not had their time playing varsity football yet.
Yeah, and I mean, just going down the schedule, Mariana first game of the year, that's tough. Mariana's always a great football team. Holmes County may be less of a threat. Same with West Florida. Fort Walton Beach is bigger, but has traditionally been pretty weak the last quarter century. And then September 26th, the big rivalry game versus South Walton. And then a couple more district games in there, thrown in there, Freeport Catholic on there, Arnold on there, Bay on there, and then McClay out of Tallahassee to round out the year. But like, we talked about, I think most of the tough games are they're away. I mean, the ones that matter anyway, right? So Catholics at home, they have a chance to upset Catholic, but the two very winnable games in South Walton and Freeport are both away this year.
Yeah, I think that's a bit unlucky. I don't want to say like it's bad to get Catholic at home and the other two on the road, but I think Catholic is probably going to beat Walton this season. And if you're Walton, you want a chance at winning those other 2 games against South Walton and Freeport. Both of those games being on the road, I don't think panned out well for them. But yeah, really looking at that South Walton rivalry matchup, that will be Friday night to watch for sure.
Absolutely. And then moving on to the western part of the county in Walton County, we're looking at Freeport. Freeport, a team that typically is in the middle of the pack, 5-5, 6-4, 4-6. Is it going to be any different this year for Coach Sean Arts?
Well, yeah, if you remember from a couple episodes ago, my team to exceed preseason expectations was Freeport. I got to talk with Coach Arts this week. Super awesome of him to give me some time on the phone. I think this year could be a little different. I think it's year 2 in 2A. Last year, 5-5 is their first year out of the rural division. I think that's really impressive. The way they've been working the schedule is obviously their district opponents are going to be bigger schools than them because they've just made this transition into 2A, and then they add some smaller schools on their schedule as well. So I think it's more of the same this year, and I think this year they also have a chance of beating some of these district opponents who are now bigger than them. They return quarterback Carter Nunes threw for 1,800 yards last year, and the number 1 tight end in Florida, according to On3 Julius Miles. That's a piece that cannot be ignored. They also get a running back who played for them freshman year, transferred to Walton sophomore year, is now back with them, back with the Freeport Bulldogs for his junior season. That's Dylan Louthan. Coach Arns described him as a Christian McCaffrey type. He can do anything with the ball in his hands. He's quick, he's agile, he can catch the ball extremely well. And they also have some question marks on defense. They have a lot of two-way players, and their goal is to reduce those two-way players so that they have 11 fresh on offense, 11 fresh on defense. I think if that goes to plan, we could be looking at Freeport as a team that exceeds what most people think they're going to accomplish this year.
Yeah, let's dig up this old that's the wrong one. Here we go. Here's the schedule for this year. Just really quickly, North Bay Haven, I don't want to say typically a cupcake team, but you know it and I know it. Jay, always a good fighting team. Cottontail, same thing as well. Northview away. They're always a little bit of trouble. Vernon, a former Niceville assistant over there, coaching at Vernon. So be prepared for a tough game there. September 26th, they have Catholic at home. And then South Walton at South Walton, October the 10th. And not October the 10th, same time as Baker. I believe that's on the 17th. My bad. And then following up with October, they have Walton. It looks like I just put one too many in there. That's on me. Finally, last game of the season, North Florida Christian, team out of Jacksonville. And if I can ever get this thing to stop looking at me, there it goes. We'll be able to see your friend of mine, Garrett Gash. Garrett, final thoughts on the Freeport Bulldogs?
I like them. I like Freeport this season. Maybe not to win the district. I know it's going to be tough to compete with Catholic, and then we talked about South Walton has a lot of key returners as well. But I think they're a team that really has a good fighting chance at finishing second and a good chance at maybe winning 2 of the district games as well. So looking forward to watching them play.
Right on. So next we're going to go into our district championship predictions. What Gary and I realized immediately before this is that we have the same ones. And I think we might serve the public better to talk about who we think is going to come into second, who might be getting a playoff spot out of these district champs. So we're going to run that beautiful bean footage, and then we're going to talk district champs. All right, so first things first, it looks like the way too early district predictions brought to you by our friend and yours, Ryan Cabanis at the Ryan Cabanis State Farm Agency over there in Niceville. Excited to have him on board for all the sports coverage, with the exception of the final approach to game day sports show that we're going to have the beginning of week 1, August the 22nd. We're going to be having that going. So expect a bunch of familiar faces on that as well. District predictions, way too early. Let's get into them. Thoughts on this district that includes Gulf Breeze, Milton, Mosley, and Niceville. You and I both have picked, well, as you might have guessed, Niceville to win this thing. But who comes in second? Who do you think is getting a playoff spot?
Yeah, I like Niceville to win, even with the uncertainties they have with the new coach, with the new quarterback. I still think Niceville has plenty of pieces in place. It's a really good football team, and they're going to come away first in this district. I do have Mosley finishing second. We always know that Niceville-Mosley battle is an interesting one to watch in the district. I think Mosley gets that playoff bid. And this one's for our good friend Colin Bester. I have Milton finishing third and Gulf Breeze rounding out the district.
I am so very close to picking Milton second. I am so very close to picking them. I'm not going to do it because the shame of being very dramatically wrong is too terrifying for me. So yes, I do have Mosley second. I have Milton third. But I do think Milton is in a position where if you play 100 games against Mosley and 100 games against Niceville with that Milton team, they win maybe 35 of them. If you do like a big sample size kind of thing. So I like Milton for that. And then I think Gulf Breeze is going to get steady trounced all year long. Brand new coach, lots of new players. I am not high on the Gulf Breeze Dolphins.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a tough year for Gulf Breeze as well. Their head coach, Jim Stomps, his son was the quarterback last season, had a good year, but he has since graduated. Coach Stomps has moved on. Whole new staff, new quarterback, new personnel. I think it's going to be tough for them to compete because this is a tough district with Niceville and Mosley, and then an upcoming Milton team especially.
Right on. Moving on to Crestview's district, because that's the only team we're really covering very heavily in our coverage area. Wow, that was a really hard thing to say just to come up with that. But you and I both picked Pace. Pace is traditionally a pretty solid team. Tate just lost a coach. Navarre's had a lot of poaching happening. And Crestview, while they have a very good defense, and I think they'll give Pace a run for their money, I'm still picking with the Pace Patriots.
I agree. It seems as though Pace is the safe bet here. I hate to make only safe bets on this show, but it'll look better at the end of the season, I think. I'm taking Pace. You're right. The other teams have just a lot of uncertainty around them with losing coaches, losing players. And then Crestview, we know what they can do defensively. What are they going to do on offense? We know they have those 2 stars at quarterback and wide receiver, running back. They can play everywhere, but we haven't really heard from anyone else on the offensive side for Crestview. So I think that's what's going to limit them, and I think that's what's going to allow Pace to win this district.
Yeah, and then Navarre and Tate, I think, are kind of X factors, but I would, if I had to pick between Navarre and Tate, I'm picking Navarre. They have more wins over the last 10 years. They look stronger, more consistent, and I think they have. When it comes to demographics, I think they have more of a selection to pick. Hurlbert's coming in to that area, and then you still get maybe a little bit of NAS Pensacola traffic. A lot of people at Eglin are bringing their, football-aged kids through there. So if I'm going to pick a team that is going to be an X factor, I'm going to pick the team with the more military kids.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I have Navarre finishing second, and then Crestview followed by Tate. So I guess wait. Did you say you had Tate finishing second? Is that right?
No, I had Pace first, and then I have Crestview. I think Crestview's defense I think it's just good enough.
Okay.
I think the 2 players whose names I have totally spaced on, McQueen and Tassine. Are those 2 guys that basically run 80% of the offense. I think that if they cannot get completely shut down in that Navarre game and put 28 points on the board, they win. But if they get fewer than 28 and the Crestview defense has to hold Navarre in bad field position, nah. So I'm picking Crestview, but I'm picking them very hesitantly.
Yeah, I think 2 through 4 in this district could honestly finish any combination of ways. So it'll be one to look out for.
Moving on to, I think, probably our favorite district to talk about. I think there's just like a lot of, first of all, there's a lot of teams that we cover regularly, which is fun. And then, yeah, Catholic's at the top. And yeah, Walton beat Catholic last year. But we're both picking Catholic. Why'd you pick them?
I picked Catholic mostly because they're turning presence. They are going to have to replace their quarterback from last season, but they have their leading returner in rushing yards, a lot of receiving yards coming back, a lot of defense coming back, and just the tradition of success. They've won a ton of district championships over there at Catholic, a good season last year. And then I think there's still too much unknown about Freeport, Walton, and South Walton for those teams to step up and really compete with Catholic in this district.
I think the really interesting part of this district is going to be who finishes second.
I agree.
I am leaning Freeport, but I am not convinced it won't be South Walton. I think that Freeport has an opportunity to do very well. I don't think they necessarily have an opportunity to defeat Catholic, but I still like them for second. I think Phil Tiza has done a good job in South Walton, building up JV kids, getting through the long, arduous march of 10 away games in a row, coming out 2-8. I mean, if you win all 5 of your home games and then you go 2-3, that's 7-win season. So I think South Walton is not too far off that mark. Just not sure that they'll be able to take Freeport, and I don't want to say 100% sure, but I'm very comfortable saying that Catholic is the best team in this district.
Yeah, like you said, the 2 through 4. That's where we're looking, essentially. I think right now I have South Walton as my 2, Freeport as my 3, and Walton as my 4. But as the season goes on, I can see that changing any sort of ways. I think Walton at 4 right now is the most comfortable pick for me, just because they're losing their entire offense, and that's really hard, especially for a high school team. Without, there is technically a transfer portal in high school football, the way we've seen it this year and as in years past. But you can't go out and get experienced guys necessarily like you would in the college game. So I think Freeport and South Walton, those are the teams to look at right now. Like you said, if South Walton or Freeport puts in a 7-3 season with 2 district wins, you could be looking at them getting one of those next best 4 bids into the playoffs. I think at the end of the season, I think this will be a 2 playoff bid district.
Very good. Last but not least is Choctaw's district. Arnold, Choctaw, Fort Walton Beach, and Rickards in this district. I believe, and I don't want to out you on this one, but I think you see this as a 9 or 10 win Choctaw team in the regular season.
I do, 100%. I think Choctaw is really good. I think they're going to be the team to beat in the Emerald Coast. We've seen it so far in preseason. They had a great year last year, and virtually everyone's coming back. Everyone is coming back.
And they got new kids.
Yeah, and they benefited, I think. If you had to talk about the teams that benefited the most in the area from transfers, I think it has to be Choctaw.
Easily. And they, like you said, they have staying power. They have kids that have been on this roster for a long time. So it's not like it's just a bunch of transfers coming in. There's a core group that has been in this Frank Beasley's offense. So I'm excited to watch them play this season. I think Fort Walton Beach is going to be better than they were last year. Watching them in the spring game play Niceville and play Crestview, as well as Mosley, they looked pretty good. And I know spring game is not indicative of future results, but a team that, got off their snaps, didn't fumble the ball, didn't bust plays early, made 1 or 2 decent passes. They looked pretty good for a team that has been down for a long time. They looked like they knew which way was up, which if you've been watching Fort Walton Beach for the last quarter century, that's a pretty big improvement.
Yeah, I think for a team that has struggled so drastically in recent years, I think Fort Walton Beach is on the up. Now, I don't think it's going to really amount to anything this season with their new first-year head coach, but I think 5 years from now, 4 or 5 years from now, if we have the same system, same head coach, if that all stays continued, I think you could be looking at Fort Walton Beach as once again challenging for this district. But right now, it's Choctaw for me, clearing away. And then I actually have Arnold finishing second. They return Will Cotter, one of the best quarterbacks in the Panhandle last season. I think they finished second. Fort Walton, I will give them third. And then Rickards bringing up the rear here. I think Fort Walton grabs a couple wins this year, one of them against Rickards.
Well, you know that I'm an OG Rickards hater, so I'm going to put them fourth as well. I'm going to put Fort Walton Beach third. I am not super impressed by Arnold in the last couple of years. but I still think they're good enough to be second. Choctaw is just that much better. And looking forward to our first week schedule, Eagles are playing the Trojans. I think the Trojans, we talked about this last week. I think they're pretty good. I think they're away, and I think that matters. I think having a new coach with the new backfield, that hurts, especially away. And so I'm not super optimistic that this first game is a win. That don't mean that Niceville can't beat Lincoln at the end of the season. We saw last year that Lincoln almost came back and beat Niceville in the regular season, and then Niceville just came out and blew the brakes off of Lincoln in the playoffs. So I think that there's potential for that as well. Looking at you, man, what do you think? Do you think I'm wrong?
No, I don't think so.
Well.
I mean, I don't want to say definitively I think Lincoln's going to win this game, but I think it is tough for Niceville. Lincoln's probably been sitting on this match the entire offseason after what happened to them last season. Niceville, less so, I think, has been focused on Lincoln. They've been focusing on their new coach, their new quarterback, getting their system in, getting their playbook in. I think Niceville will be ready. They'll be up for it 100%. I think this is going to be game of the week by far. I don't really think we're going to have a better game. Right now, like I said on last week's show, Niceville, in my opinion, will get better down the stretch when it matters most when they have those district games. This one's a toss-up for me, however.
Right on. Gulf Shores versus Choctaw. We discussed this one as well. Choctaw, very good football team. Gulf Shores, kind of a middling football team. 4-win, 5-win football team out of Alabama. So not super worried about that game. Milton and Crestview. Yeah, I picked Milton because it's at Milton, and I think Milton's a much better team this year. But I believe Crestview, I mean, they could easily win this game as well. To say that I'm picking Milton doesn't mean that I'm picking Milton by 28. It means I'm picking Milton by like heads up or half a point.
I love the ambition here. I can't say that I'm with you. As much as I want to see it happen, as much as I want Milton to walk away with the win here, I just can't say that I'm seeing Crestview winning this one.
Well, I don't know like that I'm like passionate enough about like Crestview because I'm not like a Niceville alumni, right? So it's not enough that Niceville should win, but Crestview must also lose. Doesn't like get me the way it gets some people. I think Crestview is a talented football team, but I am very excited to see a time-tested turnaround guy in Ronnie Durrell come in and make a Milton Panthers team, make them great again, I guess.
Make Milton great again. That's
Mama. So looking at that one, South Walton, I am picking over the bigger classification, Gulf Breeze Dolphins. I do think South Walton is both good, and I think Gulf Breeze is both kind of in a phase, but they don't have the raw talent like Niceville does to turn around with a new coach and make waves. But I typically just kind of to peek behind the curtains. If a team has a pedigree where it's winning with that coach or the coach is a winner, I'm very much on the players are not fungible, but it's less important than how good your coach is.
Yeah, I agree. I think their best talent, DJ Spence, he's one of those guys that transferred into Choctaw. Mm-hmm. I think without him to build around, without a quarterback to build around, South Walton takes this one for sure. Right
on. Well, coming up after a very brief break, I have an interview with FloridaHighSchoolFootballs.com, so FloridaHSFootball.com's Josh Wilson. He was kind enough to give us an interview and talk about all things high school football. He is, I think, maybe the most knowledgeable person pound for pound throughout the state. And so I'm very excited to have him on now, but I'm also super excited to build that relationship with him and make sure that when playoff time comes, that dude is on our show every weekend because he knows stuff. He knows lots of stuff. And his encyclopedic knowledge of high school football is stunning to watch. And you're about to witness some of that. So check out this interview that I have with Josh Wilson. So, Josh, thanks so much for joining us today, man, and being here on Mid-Bay News. You're kind of a legend in Florida high school football, and you know so much about it. So that's why I'm so excited to have you on. We're talking a little bit of college high school football before the season begins. And here at Mid-Bay News, we kind of cover 9 teams, the 3 teams over in Walton County and the 6 teams that we have kind of in our area here in Okaloosa County. I guess let's just get started with the big name from last year, right? Niceville High School has been a repeat contender. It has a brand new coach this year in Richard Morgan. What are you hearing or what are you seeing about Niceville that people should know going into the season? I mean, their first game against Lincoln on the 22nd of August.
You look at Niceville, you can never discount the Eagles out. Let's just say that. I don't care who the coach is at this particular point. When you look at the scheduling here, the schedule is going to be, it's going to be tough. And I know they just added Godby onto the schedule just in the last couple of weeks here. So that's huge for there. So that Niceville actually has a complete 10-game schedule. I know it's been hard for them over the years to get a full 10-game schedule, which, when you're usually, you're at the cream of the crop, you're at the top here in terms of teams here in the state here. I got to tell you, it's difficult to schedule a full 10-game slate, to get a full 10 games on that slate, unless you've got a nice sized district to work with. But that's a whole nother thing to talk about districts, and a whole nother thing here, because at the end of the day, with this in particular for Niceville, I mean, you look at the schedule. I've got it up here on my second screen here as I'm looking at the schedule here as we're talking here. I mean, Lincoln, obviously that's a great game to start off with. Lincoln. I mean, Escambia, you can never ignore Escambia, what they do. Pine Forest, you say, you look at, oh, well, they're 5-5. Oh, that's an easy rollover. But you never know with Pine Forest. You just never know what kind of Pine Forest you're going to get out of that team. And, they've got a new head coach over there in Kerry McDowell. So that's going to be interesting to see what Pine Forest looks like. I mean, the first 3 weeks right there alone. And then, of course, you get to week 4. Here's Crestview sitting here. So, I mean, really, at the end of the day, and you go into week 5, Choctaw. Okay, so, right out of the gate, first 5 weeks, boom, 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 boom. It's, at the end of the day, you just don't know what each team's going to bring about. I mean, every team starts off the season 0-0. They're looking to go 1-0 each week. And that's the beautiful thing about this when a new season rolls around, is that you just don't know what to expect sometimes. And
yeah, I mean, there's a real world in which, like, I'm not saying this happens, right? But like, if you play this scenario in the data set 100 times, right? There's a couple of times where Niceville comes out 0-5 just because of the caliber of talent they're playing. I mean, it's very rare, right? It's like 1 in 1,000 chances, but like, I mean, these are good football teams. It's not, you can't take for granted. It's not like they're gonna, like walk over the Little Sisters of the Poor or something.
No,
5 games in a row.
I mean, right now you look at the first 6 games. I mean, where's one win that I can tell you? Go ahead and circle that. That's going to be a W. It would be Gulf Breeze right now. Just go ahead and circle that game. That's gonna, the Gulf Breeze. You'll hand Niceville the W on that one. Sorry if anybody from Gulf Breeze is listening. Sorry, but it's been coaching change after coaching change after coaching change the last 3 years. So I mean, right this second, the stability of Gulf Breeze is just not there. And I'd rather be a realist and not sugarcoat it here in this situation when it comes to talking high school football.
So speaking of coaching changes and like flip ups in this district, in Niceville's district, I've been really interested in Milton. Right, because Milton brings in Ronnie, whose name I forget.
Ronnie Douglas, and I tell you, wherever he has been, wherever Ronnie Douglas puts his fingerprints at, it goes from being a losing program to being a winner. I mean, you look at what he did at Pine Forest, you look at what he's done at Tate. I mean, now it gives Milton all the juice here. It's like, okay, wait a second, let's see what Ronnie can do here. That's the hope that I'm hearing from the and I'm hearing that also, the coaches, he's brought in a credible coaching staff, coaches that have worked under him at the various stops he has been at.
And they got guys that can play ball. I mean,
that's what's mind-boggling about Milton, because Milton, you talk about it, they've had the talent the last few years. So what's happened? That's what's mind-blowing.
I feel a little more emboldened every time I say this, but the first time I said it out loud, the first time I whispered it in my own mind, I was like, you're an insane person, right? I was like, I need to get checked, right? But like, I think there is a non-zero chance that Milton wins this district this year.
Yeah, really,
Like,
it's just, that's the thing is, is there a chance somewhere in that, you got to think about it. There's been teams and this has happened. I'm going into year number 16 with this on 4hsfootball.com. Every year, there's always a few teams. There's always a handful of teams that I'm like, yeah, no, zero chance of playoffs or zero chance of winning the district. All of a sudden, here comes this team that wins this district or gets into the playoffs, and you're like, what in the world? But that's the fun thing about high school football. And that's the one thing I hope never goes away is that, hey, these teams that are the underdogs, they show up and they prove us wrong. Because at the end of the day, it always provides a good morale story. It always provides a good story for, hey, if this team can do it, so can you.
yeah. And looking at another team that has had a really big turnaround last 5 years, Choctaw, right? Choctawhatchee High School, right before COVID, was a dumpster fire. I mean, they went 0-8 and it looked ugly. And then they just had a complete turnaround. And frankly, as I look at it, just pound for pound, I think they might be the strongest team here on the Emerald Coast. I mean, Niceville's Niceville, but like Choctaw looks good, man.
I mean, despite the fact that you lost the Reese brothers, to Destin, you lose them in transfer, Choctaw still got a good core. But I also think, let's look at the coaching. Let's look at what Frank Beasley has done since coming back to his alma mater when he left the FHA, because he spent quite a bit of time in the FHA. But, you got to look at it. Look what he did at Dunellen. Look what he did as an assistant coach at Trinity Catholic. Then went to the FHA for a bit, but, the goal for him was always to get back to Choctaw. It was always to get back to Fort Walton Beach, into that area and get the Choctaw. And, ever since he's put his fingerprints on that program, I mean, you got to talk about it. I mean, they've been knocking on that door, that state semifinal. I feel like I feel like at some point they're going to be able to. Is it going to be this year or is it going to be next year? Are they going to be able to finally, hit that mountaintop, get into the state semifinals, then work their way towards, okay, can we get to the state championship game? Because I know that is always the goal for, especially, when you got a program like Choctaw or Niceville, or, I mean, you talk about any of the programs in the Panhandle that have been playoff caliber teams for a long time. The goal is to get to the state championship game. So at the end of the day, I feel like Choctaw, Frank Beasley, Coach Beasley's he's got everything there. It's just, okay, how do we work through the region? Because obviously Region 1 and most, for in the case of North Florida, Panhandle to Jacksonville usually consists of Region 1. And, the traveling, having to, you rather be at home during the playoffs if you're a team out in Pensacola or a team in Jacksonville, because you want to, hey, you know what? We got to make the other team travel, 3, 4, 5 hours. And, where the long bus rides, that seems to have an impact sometimes.
So I got 2 questions for you. This one, I cannot crack this one. All right. I've been looking at the data sets. I've been looking at historicals. I've been looking at who's playing for whom. And of Freeport, South Walton, and Walton, I can't tell you who the best team is going to be. So I'd love to get your opinion on which of those 3 teams you think will take that district. I mean, Catholic's in there as well, but I'd love to know who ends up on top in Walton County this year.
I feel like Walton takes a step back because you graduate several key guys from that team right there. I feel like that's,
and a new coach.
Yeah. That, I feel like that's going to be a huge, that's going to be a huge, setback for them, is that, obviously losing those key players. But, Jay Lindsay, he's has experience as a head coach. I feel like he'll be able to come in. It's just going to maybe take a moment for him to put what he wants together as, as a head football coach again. And, not having those key guys, I think that's going to be the key thing right there. Freeport, I mean, Freeport could be, one of those teams that, you could either say, hey, there's a chance they may go, say, hey, 7-3, but they could also go on the other side and be 4-6, because you just don't know how things are going to be. And really, let's be honest here. Let's be honest about Freeport in this situation. I mean, we even be about Walton. I wouldn't say so much about South Walton, and I'll get to that in a moment here. But with Freeport and Walton, they're really technically, even though they're 2A schools, they're still technically characteristically rural schools. They're not overly big schools. Now, I eventually see Freeport moving away from being, more characteristically rural. I know it's growing out there over the years. I mean, when you get a Publix in Freeport, that's it. You're moving up on you're moving up in the scales here. But at the end of the day, you're still pulling from a smaller area with these guys. So, talent wise, you're having to kind of flex around a bit. Obviously you go to South Walton with Santa Rosa Beach all the way along, 30A and all that's developed up all over the years. I mean, at some point, really honestly with South Walton, if you would think that South Walton probably would be the core talent nucleus in this situation. But if I'm going to say a district winner between those three teams and Pensacola Catholic, I'm still going to lean my bets onto Pensacola Catholic, even though they do lose a few key pieces, and they are having, a coaching transition with Bobby Clayton obviously coming back over to the Pensacola area and taking over that job. I feel like Pensacola Catholic still is that driver in the driver's seat in that district for right now until something changes.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only big change, I think this is where like that Niceville coaching change, if it does not go well, right? So not this year, but maybe in 2 to 3 years, you see Freeport becoming a lot stronger because it's a lot easier, just the way that jobs and stuff work out here. A lot of people are Air Force, so a lot of people that live in Freeport might work at the base. That might be a legitimate funnel for them to keep them, because traditionally all those kids in Freeport that were any good headed over to Niceville, or you had the Thomas brothers that would come over from Walton and then head over to Niceville. So if that doesn't go well, I think that district becomes a lot more interesting.
No, I think you're right in that situation. It's and this you see it in a lot of areas where military families live, where you've got a lot of military. It's where it's not okay. Nice, let's look at it. Fort Walton Beach, Niceville, the main core of the area, but Freeport, these areas, Santa Rosa Beach, the Phoenix Springs, they're the suburbs to the military base. And I obviously growing up where I grew up in the Jacksonville area, you saw that all the time, where the military families coming in and out. So that's going to be the one thing that could be to Freeport's benefit down the road. Hey, maybe some military families move in. Hey, you got some muscle coming in. That's where it's going to be, beneficial. Freeport, maybe even, South Walton, and then Walton, maybe all three benefit at the same time, depending on where these families move in and out of.
And they finally beat Bowles, huh?
Yeah. Let's not go there, because honestly, I mean, we can go there, because I still have a critical opinion to this day that I feel like Metro Suburban should have never been gotten rid of. I feel like Metro Suburban was the closest thing to a competitive balance as we could get in that particular moment. Yes, was there some things that need to be tweaking? Oh, obviously there's no system that's ever going to be perfect. But if we go back and look at the teams in the Panhandle and look at the teams that were suburban versus the teams that were considered Metro, when you start looking at everything in the playoff brackets, things closed up. That gap closed up. Games were much more competitive last year. Might as well just throw everything out the window, because if you're a Freeport, you're a South Walton, you're Walton, or you're a Pensacola Catholic, you're any of these schools in 2A. I mean, you're a Mariana, for instance. I mean, any of y'all out there, along the I-10 corridor, you're looking at bulls in the headlights, basically, in this situation, and that's just the way it is. And until something changes, there's just not going to be that room for that competitive balance until you're like, oh, well, we got to play Bulls as well. I mean, yes, there's always that where a team is going to come in that can beat Bulls, but it's more rare than not.
It happens after they play one of us.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
So for our listeners on the Mid-Bay News side, Bowles is a private school out of Jacksonville. They've won the most state titles of any team in any
actually, they got overtaken
right?
by St. Thomas Aquinas in the last couple of years.
That's right.
But they did a long time.
But they have 13 state championships?
Yeah.
And so they're good and they're small. And so what that means is that you get essentially what I would consider a 5 or 6A program, right, in terms of the quality, playing the Little Sisters of the Poor. And so I was going through historicals last night to finish up some of our stuff over here on midbaynews.com. And it was fun to watch all the Walton schools run into the wall at Bowles, and they would lose 55-7. And these are teams that would win 11, 12 games, right? And then they'd show up, they'd play Bowles, they'd lose by 50, and they'd go home. And so everybody goes like, oh, well, why doesn't, Walton, who consistently has 8, 9, 10 wins a year, how have they never made it deep into the playoffs? And the answer is Bowles.
Well, yeah, look at the brackets. When you go back and look at the 2 years of Metro Suburban, you look at the teams, when all these schools were in Suburban here in the Panhandle versus when, they're having to play in a region where it's okay, it's Pensacola to Jacksonville. It doesn't matter if you're suburban, you're rural, or you're all the way out there and you're deep into the city. It does matter because honestly, at the end of the day, also, hey, where can you get kids from? Hey, you know what? City of Jacksonville just became a population of over 1 million in the city limits just in the last few months. Okay, well, guess what? You've got the picking of the crop there, basically, of how many students you can have in your school or what kind of talent comes around. All right. That luxury is not afforded to Freeport. That luxury is not afforded to South Walton. That luxury is not afforded to Definiak Springs over there in Walton. It's not even afforded to Okaloosa County in this situation. So, I mean, when we talk about it, the boundaries, the zones, really, how much of a population you can have, and really, it comes down to these schools that you're just not, until something changes in terms of how schools are classified again. I mean, it's going to be hard for teams to make a deep playoff push coming out of the Panhandle, especially if you're in that 2A bracket. Maybe not so much the 5A bracket, as we saw in Niceville. Obviously, you knock on Lakeland's door. I mean, I do wonder if it had been Niceville in that state title game against St. Thomas Aquinas, would it have been a goose egg? I think it would have been. I think it might have been a little bit of a different story. I think Niceville would have kind of given them a little bit more punch, basically. It's like Lakeland tried to give a punch and it was like, nah, and then it was like there was no punch.
Yeah. We've talked about that kind of a little bit, and like the consensus is like, maybe we wouldn't have done worse, but they're like, it's like, we don't know, but like, we'd like to think that maybe we would have given them a 21-point game.
Yeah, that's what I would have liked to think too.
So, everybody up here is like very convinced that like anything south of Orlando, there will be dragons. And I don't want to say that people have given up on the idea of winning a state championship, because that's not true. But I think that they're very realistic about how much more difficult that could be, just logistically and economically, and all the things that don't count on the field of play, right, have made it so much more difficult for somebody from the north of Orlando to win a state title in the brackets that we're in. Not to say that it's impossible, because it can be done, but
I mean, you're in the rural classification. I mean, you look at it. I mean, it's almost, most years it's up for grabs in, some sense, I mean, obviously Madison County and Hawthorne have kind of dueled for it over the last 5 years, but really at the end of the day, I mean, you take outside the rural bracket, it's like, okay, who from north of I-4, as you mentioned, it really is who's going to come from that. And it's been, that's where, a lot of people argue about the Metro Suburban, because it was, okay, these schools, especially even north of I-4, had the chance to at least compete for something on that end. But now it's not that same situation anymore, where it's like, oh, well, it's going to be South Florida. And it's like, for me, it's doing this as long as I have. I don't enjoy it when it's like, okay, I don't really particularly enjoy it when I'm saying, hey, this team's going to win a state championship, let's just go ahead and hand them the trophy, because it doesn't make it fun. It doesn't make it fun in that sense, that saying, hey, it's going to be, oh, well, here we go. So, I mean, I was talking about it with some colleagues of mine the last few years, actually when they did the last reclassification, like, well, there's that team. This team's going to win it. Sure enough, what happens? These teams won their state championships. I mean, it just literally, it's like, okay, how are we going to handle this? And, you see the stuff of going down in South Florida, Miami Northwestern, and it's, everybody's causing, it's a firestorm there. We just saw that with First Academy in Orlando. So it's like, okay, what's going on here? And it's like, wait a second, there is significant differences between, obviously the city areas versus what's out in the Panhandle. And it's like, and I say this, a lot of people forget about the Panhandle in media coverage. I don't try to forget about the Panhandle, because the Panhandle is just as important. The Panhandle is just as important a region in the state as South Florida or Orlando or Southwest Florida or Jacksonville. So at the end of the day, it's it's from Pensacola to Key West. There's no gaps in between in that, in what I like to look at.
So, final question. This really rolls well into what you were talking about. The new super playoff, right, that we're going to have starting next year, where it's going to be like the 8 best teams best teams that'll go and do the final playoff. Do you think that will make it so that there will be can somebody from north of I-4 win a 5A state championship when, the big boys are out elsewhere pounding each other in the super duper turbo amazing bracket?
The first thing I think is are you going to get these teams to agree to do this, especially if you make it voluntary? And that's what it seems like. That's, to me, is like, okay, well, am I gonna take my chances out of winning a state title in the bracket? If I'm in my particular bracket, when I know my path is much clearer in my particular classification bracket, or go over to this, or go over to this open division bracket over here on the other side of things, and be like, okay, you know what? Well, I may have a chance here in this game, but you know what? I'm getting blown out the next game because there's someone better than me in this situation, and they're gonna just get us, and that's it. Dreams over, state champion, state title is out the door. Again, it goes back to, if you had just given Metro Suburban another 2 years, I think they then at that point we could have maybe talked to open division bracket, but kept it around a little bit. Maybe okay, maybe it's a top 8, but you know what? Maybe it's a half split of, okay, you got 4 teams coming from Metro, 4 teams from Suburban because of the top 8 teams. Didn't let it play it. I feel like that would have given a better measure. But right this second, when you start pulling these teams out, I just don't know these teams, especially if you're telling these teams it's just voluntary. You know what? Okay, are you going to find 8 teams that are going to go? The top 8 teams are going to go. Are they going to be willing to go if you're telling them it's voluntary instead of telling them, no, if it's the top 8 teams, you're moving? But see, here's part of the problem. And this is where I see where part of the problem can come into this kind of idea with this bracket. Women's of Madison County. Rural Madison County, which their population's been on a decline. They've had some issues. The hurricanes obviously have impacted them. They've impacted them, but not as greatly as what's happened in Taylor County, which is a whole nother story for another day. But if you get a situation where you get a rural school, all of a sudden it's for some reason they're in the top 8. You think you think that when they look at that and they see a Miami Central and a Chaminade Madonna, do you think they're going to want to take that on for some of these programs? No, it's just not, it doesn't make sense.
Congratulations on your excellent season. Would you like to lose by 80?
That's the thought I was having there. It's like, okay, here's the reward. Yeah, here's a trip to Chaminade Madonna because you're the 8 seed and they're the 1 seed. Congratulations. That's where I see where the voluntary issue is going to come into play, is that they are going to look at it and be like, okay, my chances versus this team versus my chances against this team in my own bracket. I'd rather take my own bracket and go with, you know what, if I lose in the later rounds, you know what, hey, at least I had a chance. You know what, I may be out to one and done in that bracket. That's, get it, the idea of having this open division bracket. It's great. It's a great idea in some aspects. I get it, maybe TV revenues and stuff. I know that California does it. I know that Arizona's got one, but we haven't solved the main issues that are going on. And that is dealing with classifications, especially the fact we got, classifications is one thing that we've got to deal with. The second thing is that we're a unique state in a lot of ways because we're the only ones that really does open enrollment the way we do it. Where Florida is so unique in that situation until we address these issues, which I thought Metro Suburban was starting to handle some of that. Not so much now that we're back to square one here. And you can't just, in my opinion now, these days, you can't just use enrollment strictly as the means of classifying schools. You've got to look at other factors going on here. And when, again, you've got a bigger population area to roll with and more people to pull from, that is going to definitely weigh a factor for some of the schools in the bigger cities to win games versus the schools in the rural areas to again, make it deep into the playoffs. Again, you're going to have those few schools that are going to do it. They're going to find a way. They will always find a way. But at the end of the day, is the playing field level? Not so much right now.
Well, that's the time we have. So Joshua Wilson, I'm going to need to have you back on pretty regularly.
Yes.
Because this has been an awesome conversation.
I'll come back more often than not.
Excellent. So FloridaHSFootball.com for everything, all from Key West to Pensacola. Go Conks. And we will see you soon, my brother.
Thank you. I appreciate it, man.
What would you think, man? 18 playoff, you in or what?
I still like it. I still like the idea of it. I think if you have, I see his argument 100%. The 8 seed is probably going to get whacked by the 1 seed time after time after time. But I think 1 through 4, and maybe even 1 through 6, they all have a chance at winning. And I think that could be a spectacle to see. I do foresee there being problems with the voluntary issue for sure. I know I wrote about that in an article maybe a month or so ago. But I personally would like to see it play out for a couple of years. And I think as the kinks are worked out, I think it could be something cool to watch.
And do you think, I'm trying to think of all the teams that would be the most likely suspects up here, right? So Choctaw, Niceville, Lincoln, maybe Pine Forest or Pensacola, whoever has all the players that year. Who would you see making it to this 18 playoff the most regularly out of kind of our coverage area?
I don't know if we would see any of them regularly make this playoff, but Niceville, Choctaw, like the schools you mentioned, I think it was fascinating the way they talked about that Niceville state semifinal against Edgewater a couple years back. I was a sophomore in high school at Niceville, so I was there for that game, absolute heartbreaker. But it did have us wondering if we were to go play St. Thomas Aquinas at in the state championship game, would we have done anything? And I think that's the argument there for schools in our area in the Panhandle. If we're having to play these teams from Orlando, Miami, Jacksonville, that's where it gets tough. So I think if you have 8 schools from down there, maybe I think you get more competitive football. But I think there are some teams up in the Panhandle who are probably more deserving of that spot.
Right on. Well, that's all we have in this almost hour-long Emerald Coast Sports Show. Thanks so much to Josh Wilson for showing up for us, giving us a breakdown of everything high school football as we head, what is it now? Today's August the 8th, so 14 days away from first kick where it counts.
I'm so excited. 2 weeks to go. I'm going to be locked in on it. Let's get it.
Right on, guys. Well, see you guys later. And always remember to give us a like or share or subscribe or whatever the button is on your preferred medium. We'd love to have you aboard.